So we've got to the point where we've unpacked our values and beliefs. We understand how those feed into our purposes for schooling, our vision of what success would look like, individual fulfillment and universal well-being. We've identified what the quality curriculum would be, in essence, what our goals are, how we would know that our vision was being realized. But of course, what you teach has implications for how you teach. You probably wouldn't teach someone to play soccer in the same way that you'd teach them to do long division. So we need to think about pedagogy, how learning is supported. And I have this naive view that the way in which we support learning ought to reflect the way in which people actually learn, so that what we do pedagogically ought to enhance human learning and build upon the natural ways in which we already learn. So let's look in a bit about how do people learn. And I want to draw on some research that I did back in 2006 to 2008. I'd been doing all this work on vision building, had been going really badly. And one of my colleagues said, why don't we give people a lived experience of doing something radically different? So we brought all of these 13 to 65-year-olds into an island in Second Life, which is an immersive virtual world. And we experimented with different ways of supporting their learning. You can go to the website www.scome.ac.uk and you can see the wiki and the forum that are still there. You can't get into the island. But I learned a lot about how people learn from this experiment. And here, one of the examples was Trixie, who was the queen of the pixies. She came up to me one day and she said, Ranger, I was the Scone Ranger. Ranger, will you give me away? And I'm like, what do you mean, Trixie, will I give you away? And she said, I want to get married. I want to get married to Wintermute. Now, Wintermute was a brain in a jar, and like in Futurama, and he was one of the most challenging characters within Scone Park, I have to say. And I was not keen on giving Trixie away to Wintermute. I had this vision in my head of the front of the Daily Mail, which is one of our kind of newspapers, more salacious newspapers in England, about the head of Department of Education gives away the Queen of the Pixies to a brain in a jar. It wasn't going to go down well. I was the child protection officer. This was my nightmare. So anyway, I'm having this conversation with Trixie, and she's trying to persuade me to give her away. And after a lot of toing and froing, I explained to her my concern, about the newspaper and about having closed down the island if we get all this kind of bad publicity. And she comes up to me and she says, Peter, you do understand that, they have weddings in PG movies. Everything on the island was PG, it had to be parental guidance. I said, yeah, but that's not the problem. The problem is, what are the newspapers going to make of it? And she went away and thought a bit, and she then came back in a bit and she said, Peter, you do realise this is all pretend, don't you? At which point they got married, and they were flown in the white Rolls Royce, and they had a camera person. You can watch the video on YouTube, and they had the disco afterwards with virtual champagne and music that they were probably illegally playing through Second Life. And they learned a lot from the experience of pretending to get married and of preparing the wedding and of making all the arrangements. So they were learning through role play because they knew it was pretend. And then the next thing that struck me about how we learnt happened again. This is me, the Scone Ranger, floating above Scone Park in the very early days. And you can see all of these objects flying in the sky, and people were allowed to build wherever they wanted above 200 meters. And very soon we exceeded the limit of how many things the island could cope with having on it. And so we had a problem, because when you exceed the limit, everything goes laggy. So avatars come in and they render without any clothes, and you can't move, and everything falls apart. So I went back to the community and said, look, it's your island. What are you going to do about it? So they had some discussions about what they would do, and they discussed different forms of governance, and probably mistakenly they decided that democracy was the best way to go, because we all know that benign dictatorship, so long as you can maintain the benignness, which is the real challenge, but that benign dictatorship is actually the most efficient form of governance. But let's not go there, that's politics. So anyway, they set up 7 government departments, and one of which was the planning department. And they required everybody to get planning permission if they wanted to build. And if you didn't get planning permission, they would come along and they'd stick a sign on your construction and say, if you haven't got planning permission within 2 weeks, we're going to delete this. And I tell you, there was absolutely nothing pretend about the reaction that you got if you deleted something that someone had spent 20 or 30 or 40 hours constructing. So they were learning through becoming. They were the planning officers. They were actually deleting people's buildings. It was very real. There was nothing pretend about it. And then in 2015 to 2017, I had another project called New Purposes, New Practices, New Pedagogy, NP3. And we were looking at pupils' digital practices outside school and the extent to which those influenced practices inside school and what factors made a difference to that. And the bit that was really struck me about how people learn was looking at how the kids were learning outside school with digital technology. So we've got Rory. Rory was 10, and Rory was a gamer. He played Minecraft. He also did acting and filming and all sorts of other stuff. And he'd learned how to play Minecraft because his mum, when he was about 6, bought a book on playing Minecraft. And she worked through the book with him, showing him how to play Minecraft. And very soon he got better at Minecraft than she was. And she gradually then allowed him to start playing with other people online, but people he knew in the physical world initially. And then after a while, that expanded to people he didn't know in the physical world. And he got to the stage where he was making mods and he was making films of what he was doing in Minecraft Machinima. And he was sharing those things on YouTube. And he became one of the kind of recognized experts within the Minecraft community. He was inducted into that by his mum. And then Latifa. Latifa was a Somalian refugee. She lived in a 2-bedroom flat with her family. She slept in the same bed as her mum. And she had a YouTube channel. And I discovered about this actually because I was interviewing her and we were waiting for her mum to bring in the digital camera, which Latifa had left at home. And we were sat in the school lobby. And Latifa suddenly started to whisper, and she didn't want the school to know. So we went off into a side room, and she showed me her YouTube channel, and it was amazing. She had this really sophisticated understanding of different YouTube genres. And she had this really sophisticated way of dealing with comments and haters in particular. And she wasn't just putting up videos, but she was building a community of people who were watching her videos and commenting on her videos. And she was engaging with them through those comments. Very sophisticated. But again, she'd been inducted into it. Her mum supported her with her original channel. Her mum still commented on the videos that she was making, even now she had her own channel. Her sister was a tech nerd, as she described it, and supported her when she got stuck. And her brother was also a YouTuber and actually had made quite a lot of money through his YouTube channel. So again, she'd been inducted into being a YouTuber and creating these really quite phenomenal videos. So this got me thinking about, what is learning? And I come from a sociocultural perspective. So within that sort of worldview, learning is about identity formation. It's about who you are and your place in the world. And fundamentally, it's about becoming a member, participation, of an enduring collection of people, a community, who are mutually engaged in a shared endeavor. So they have a shared purpose and shared ways of working that they value. So then what is learning from a sociocultural perspective? Well, in terms of why we learn, it's to pursue an interest. It's to achieve a personal goal. The motivation is intrinsic. It happens flexibly throughout our lives over a prolonged period of time. I'll do a bit of it here and a bit of it there when I get the chance. but it will be something that I'm interested in, so it will carry on over a prolonged period of time. It happens in context when I'm in Minecraft, when I'm with other YouTubers or thinking about creating YouTube videos or working with friends in school who are also YouTubers. The teacher, the people who support my learning are other members of the community, other people who've got the same shared focus and shared valued ways of working. And they view me as a learner as being someone who has expertise but lacks experience within this community. So I have things to bring. I'm not an empty vessel, but I'm not familiar with the valued ways of working within this particular community. And so the role of the teacher, the role of the person who's supporting my learning is to induct me into the valued ways of being. It's about orchestrating activities and making connections to mature practices in the world. And the method through which I learn is originally maybe through role play and trying things out, but then it's by actually becoming. I become a YouTuber. I become a gamer. I become an expert in playing the violin by doing it. And by understanding the ways in which violinists work and the things that they value and think are appropriate and the things that they don't value and don't think are appropriate. And that contrasts with formal learning, where actually almost every single one of those dimensions is different. So, the motivation for learning in school is extrinsic and it's about getting qualifications. When you learn is in limited time periods that are timetabled, your 50-minute lessons, if you will. Where it tends to be decontextualized, it's not in the context of where you're actually going to use it. So when you're doing maths, you're doing abstract maths. You're not doing real world maths. And if you look at how people do maths in the real world, it's very different to how they do it in a maths lesson. And the view of the learner very often is that they're passive, ignorant, empty vessel to be filled, or at best, that they are making connections and constructing their mental models. And the role of the teacher in formal learning is about the guide or scaffold at best, or telling you at worst. And how you learn in school, well, we know about this. We learn by being told, and sometimes we learn by doing, but the doing is decontextualized. And it's decontextualized, for example, when you look at a science experiment, because if you don't get the answer the teacher expects, she doesn't say, wow, that's interesting, let's explore that further and see why that happens. She's much more likely to say, copy the results off the group next to you and write it up for homework. That's not science. So in school, in formal learning, we tend to learn by being told and by doing in a decontextualized way. And if you're lucky, you might do a bit of role play, but you're very unlikely to do any of that becoming stuff. So what does this mean for how we teach? Well, first of all, there are multiple approaches. There isn't one right answer. You need to align how you teach, how you support the learner with their needs. It's about being part of community, and trust is really important. And we know that because all this stuff about learning from our mistakes and the importance of relationships and feeling safe is absolutely critical to learning. It's about constructively critical bi-directional feedback. That bi-directional is really important. It's not just the teacher giving feedback to the student, but it's the student giving feedback to the teacher, so the teacher understands where the student is at, and also so the teacher can become better, because within this model, the teacher is also a learner. And constructively critical, it's about saying, not you're bad, but that thing you did could be better if you did it like this. So it's helping them to see the way forward. It does involve direct instruction. This is kind of Hattie's stuff, but that doesn't mean didactic teaching. Direct instruction is about both the learner and the teacher having a clear understanding of what it is they're trying to achieve, what their goal is, and how they're going to get there, who they're going to work with, what they're going to do, how they're going to solve the problem, and what the outcome is going to be. But that doesn't have to come from the teacher to the learner. It could be the learner specifying that they're going to do a project and this is how they're going to do it, and they're telling the teacher how it's going to be. Because it's about participation, it's about being agentive, it's about making meaningful decisions, it's about acting and collaborating and being part of that community and working with other people. And the role of the teacher is very much about bridging between the child's current understandings of what is valued and ways of working, and those things which are valued within that community. So it's about inducting the child in, it's about making those links between the child's current understandings and what is valued within that particular community. And of course, it's about challenging, it's about pushing people to do better, to go further, because we can all improve. No matter how good something is, you can always do better. And really critically, it's about enhancing self-efficacy. It's about enhancing your belief in yourself to succeed, but realistically. And it's got to be sustained. And so we get into this kind of breadth against depth argument. We tend in schools to have very broad curricula. We've got to cover a lot of stuff, which means we don't do it in depth. But if you really want to enhance learning in the way that sociocultural theory would advise, then you need to do it in a sustained sort of manner. So these are the sorts of things that I would argue that you need to be doing if you're going to teach in a way that really builds upon and reinforces how human beings actually learn.